Net and vet. Time's up. Everybody put your pencils down and turn your papers over, said Mrs. Campbell, the school's strictest math teacher. With a satisfied sigh, Net placed her pencil on the desk, turned her paper over, and settled back in her seat, waiting for the bell to ring. As the teacher walked slowly around the room collecting test papers, she looked around the room. She was amused at the faces of the ones who had not studied for the math quiz that had promised to for a whole week. In her opinion, there was no need to panic after a test. Either you passed it or you didn't. And if you didn't study, you knew you had failed. So there was no need to sit looking stupid like the most inconceivable thing had just happened to you. The students in her class slowly began gathering their books so that when the bell rang, they could all drag to the door, moaning and groaning to each other about how unfair the test was. Chuckling to herself, Net slowly rose from her seat as the bell let out its howling moan, signaling the end of another 45 minutes of priceless education. She had only taken 2 steps towards the door when she noticed a small group of girls huddled together, whispering excitedly and quietly laughing. She was only mildly curious about what they were saying, but immediately dismissed them since she didn't usually associate with anyone other than her crew. It was not their silly behavior, however, that caused her suspicion to rise, but the fact that as she drew near, one of the girls hunched the other and they all fell silent so that she wouldn't hear what they were saying. Refusing to acknowledge these losers, she walked by them without so much as a glance in their direction. She would have made it to her next class where she would eventually have simmered down and forgotten about these stupid little nothings had it not been for the fact that as soon as they thought she was out of earshot, they resumed their conversation and she distinctly heard her brother's name. Not sure she had heard correctly, she spun around and glared at the offenders who froze in mid sentence and stepped back in terror, a testament that the reputation of Net was known far and wide. She would never embarrass herself by speaking to these losers, but her curiosity was killing her, and she vowed to get to the bottom of whatever was going on. The reaction of the girls fed fuel to the fire that had started when she heard her brother's name coming from their lying mouths. She didn't know what they were saying about him, but she knew her brother was not one to do things to cause his name to be whispered in the hallways. She decided she would wait until she got to her sister and Jill to get to the bottom of this little mystery, but was taken aback when she heard her brother's name whispered among a group of sophomores standing near the entrance to the stairway. They too stopped when they spotted her, turning to look at the ceiling and whistling so as not to meet her glance as she glared at them. With her blood boiling, she had to use all of her strength not to walk over to the ugliest of the bunch, a severely obese, sloppy, pimply faced white boy with greasy, stringy hair and a foul odor of garlic that emanated from his sweaty body in nauseating waves and punching him right in his fat face. The other 3 boys that surrounded him were equally as repulsive in their own unique, pathetic way. 2 of them, both seniors, that had been left back twice, were from the special ed class, which meant they were well known in the guidance counselor's office. It was no surprise to see them being escorted by school security at any time of the day, and everyone that meant to do anything positive with their life wouldn't be caught dead with them. It was rumored that they acted the way they did because they had been picked on so much because of the darkness of their skin. Coming from Nigeria, they were very, very dark in complexion, and their accent was so heavy they were not easily understood. Instead of trying to blend in, they chose to attach themselves to two other losers of the school: Ernie, the walking blimp, and Fowler, the school's only openly gay student. So flamboyant was he that he would wear a wig, purple lipstick, and brightly colored fake nails to school. Fowler chose every opportunity to annoy everyone that crossed his path. He seemed to get pleasure when he knew he was offending someone, and offend he did. It was not, however, the fact that he was gay or the outrageous attire he sometimes sported that kept all the girls shaking their heads at him, but the fact that he was a drop dead gorgeous guy and they felt his sexual preference to be such a waste. Knowing that to get into a confrontation with these three jerks would mean the beginning of an all-out war that would last the entire school year, Net sucked her teeth and continued on her way. Not that she was afraid or that it would be just her against them. Net was by no means alone. She had enough friends to rally behind her in the event of any kind of confrontation to guarantee that she would win. She just wasn't in the mood this morning to be bothered with anyone. It infuriated her to hear them laugh and raise their voices so that she could hear their next remarks, but she just kept on going. Dude, I heard he was giving her a throat exam when he got busted and she was grinding him to the wall, wheezed Logan, the walking blimp, in a nasally voice. Me here, she was holding man's meat, joined the taller of the Nigerian misfits. And she not the only one got caught with the handful, you know, his fellow Nigerian bellowed as they all burst into gales of laughter before being cut off by Fowler clutching his privates and talking in a seductive bedroom voice. Good as that Matty look, me wouldn't a mind get caught with him hands down me pants. With that, they all looked to see if Net was still in hearing range of their raunchiness as they burst into gales of laughter again. I don't know who started these rumors, but I am going to kill somebody this day, thought a furious Net to herself as she stormed past her classroom door, having decided to skip her next class to find her sister before the rumors did. It had only been a short 45 minutes, but the news of Matt and Danny's little episode had traveled around the entire school via the teenage grapevine, started by none other than Danny herself. She had not wasted any time in texting Cherie, knowing she would tell every available ear she could find. There was no intent on either one of their parts of being upset about the spreading of their news, since they had planned the whole thing from the very beginning. Cherie was the mastermind behind the plot, and when she got word from her cohort that it all went off as planned, she set the second part of the plan into effect, which was to spread the word to all she met. She had been following the security officer as she made her rounds and kept Danny informed of her whereabouts every second of the way. They knew she would be checking the stairway where Danny and Matt would be necking, which is why Danny lured Matt there in the first place. Although she would feign innocence and hurt as the rumors that would eventually find its way back to the ears of the Jones family, she was overjoyed that the plan she and her best friend had hatched was off to a roaring start. Vet had just received her Spanish test back from the teacher and for the billionth time decided that she was absolutely, unconditionally hated Spanish. She couldn't understand the singulars and the plurals and the yos and the k's. She was sure there was never going to be a need in her life for this dreadful, confusing language and wished she could stop wrecking her brain with it now. It would be easier for her to accept her failure in this class if she was goofing off and not really putting in her all. But she actually studied and fasted and prayed, and still she couldn't make heads or tails of the subject. She even took tutoring classes and walked away even more frustrated than when she arrived. She had just agreed to study with Rife as a last-ditch effort to save face from an embarrassing failing grade, but she wasn't sure if that was such a good idea. She was head over heels in love with Rife and had to constantly remind herself she was a Christian to keep her mind in a holy, clean place when she was around him. Vet never doubted her faith in God, but there was a time when she'd had plenty of doubt in herself. She used to bury herself in her books and in the church because she felt overshadowed by her sister. But ever since she had been keeping company with Rife, her confidence in herself grew by leaps and bounds. Just the thought that she could pull someone like an incredibly handsome, athletic hunk like Rife was almost beyond belief. Ever since he had arrived at their school, he had been a hot item, and every girl tried to get his attention. Of course, it was rumored that she must be putting out if he was going with her and staying with her. But she and Rife didn't care. They knew the truth and didn't care what anyone else thought. Still, it was a thrill to be the object of everyone's envy, and it boosted Vet's fragile ego to the breaking point. Vet wasn't the only one that noticed a change in herself. Denise, Matt, and Net noticed the new smile and the new walk and the new look of Miss Vet. Net was happy for her sister in the beginning and encouraged her new relationship with Rife because when her time came to keep company, this relationship would be the measure by which her limits and curfews would be hinged. Although Matt was caught up in his whirlwind of a relationship with Danny, he still noticed that his usually prim and conservative sister was a little more expressive in her attire and smiled more around the house. She even began giving Knit a run for her money when the telephone rang, much to the annoyance of their mother. Denise was determined not to have her mind so deep into her Bible that she lost track of her children, so she kept a wary eye on Vet and Matt and prayed hard for the raging hormones of the four teenagers. She prayed for Net too, knowing that the absence of a certain someone paying special attention to her at this particular time was likely to push her faster towards a relationship than she might have originally intended. Net was used to being the center of attention, and the fact that her sister and brother had a so-called steady was not sitting well with Miss Popularity. She remembered what it was like to have your first crush, all giddy and stuff. Everything was special, and you smiled at the least provocation. The first song you shared with that special someone would, for the rest of your life, trigger a tidal wave of emotions that either made you smile or sigh or blush or maybe even cry. Yes, Denise was well aware of the extra bounce in the step of her oldest daughter and the extra cologne that floated around her son. And although she wasn't exactly happy about the development of things as of late, she also knew that she could not stop the inevitable. She had healthy, beautiful, talented children, and she knew it was just a matter of time before the opposite sex was going to come a calling. She just wished it wasn't until they were a little older. As a loving, devoted parent, she was concerned, but she had to admit she wasn't overly worried because she knew she had taught her children well. They had to grow up sometime, and they all knew she couldn't watch them every minute of the day. So it was up to them to remember their teachings, as well as the fact that God was watching them even when she wasn't. So, temptations weren't the only things that surrounded the Jones as they went about their day. Because of the fervent prayer of this righteous woman, they were covered by the blood of the Lamb. Vet was a good girl, and she usually shared everything with her sister and even had heart to heart talks with her mother. It was not uncommon for her mother to ask them how they were doing in the boys' department. She left no stone unturned when she told them about the birds and the bees. And she always told them the door to her room was always open if they ever had any questions for her. Sitting in her classroom, wrestling over thoughts of Spanish and rife, Vet would have been relieved to know her mother was aware of and understood the turmoil that she was going through. But instead of going to her and sharing her doubts, she worried and prayed for strength to remain strong in her faith. Her education was very important to her, and she had promised herself a long time ago not to let anyone come between her and her degrees. Everyone in her little group of friends admired her for her academic successes. Last year, she had made the dean's list, and no one was more proud of her than her own self. But ever since Rife had looked into her eyes and told her he loved her, she was finding it more difficult to concentrate on her studies. She loved the attention she was getting from Rife, but she didn't like the effect he had on her grades. She was looking out the window pondering these things when Rachel softly called her and told her, "Look at the door." When she saw her sister standing at the door to her classroom with an expression of pure rage on her face, the first thing she thought was, "Oh Lord, what had Danny and Sherry done now? And would she be able to stop her sister from killing them?" She raised her hand to ask her teacher for permission to go to the restroom, and when she didn't hear the usual tinkle that sounded when she moved her arm, remembered again with annoyance that she had somehow misplaced the charm bracelet her mother had given her for Christmas. She had never misplaced any of her jewelry before, and found it strange that no one at home had seen her bracelet. She distinctly remembered taking it off when she had taken a shower last night, but when she had gone back into the bathroom, it was gone. And when she had asked everyone, they said they hadn't gone into the bathroom after her. She looked in the medicine cabinet, on the floor, in her room, in the clothes hamper, in the kitchen, but the bracelet never showed up. That bracelet was very special to her because it held symbols of the most important times of her life. There was a miniature bowling ball on it representing her bowling trophy, a miniature Bible representing her first place win in the annual Bible trivia contest, a miniature comb representing her interest in hair care, a miniature heart representing her volunteer work at the Children's Hospital last summer, and a miniature number 3 because she was one of a set of 3 triplets. All these charms were picked with thought and much care and meant the world to her, and the thought of losing it made her sick to her stomach. She had a sneaky feeling that one of the new kids at home had something to do with the absence of her bracelet. But with no proof, she kept quiet, not wanting to accuse anyone falsely. Still, she knew she had left the bracelet in the bathroom and vowed to keep looking for it until it was found. And if by some chance it was taken by one of the new kids, well, heaven help them, because if there was one thing Vet hated, it was a thief.